Charlamagne the God sat in a Netflix studio 2 days ago, watched another radio host do the one thing his own show never did in 5 separate sit-downs with Claressa Shields, and instead of admitting that was a failure, he called it good radio, and said nobody will ever ask her that question again. Nobody. Ever. Again. That is a man on the biggest daily live show in the country announcing, out loud, on camera, that a question is off limits, and then laughing while he says it. And here is the part that should be bothering you more than the laugh. The woman who asked it, MZ Shinika on the Street's morning takeover in Atlanta, does not have Netflix money, does not have iHeart syndication, does not have a daily live slot in front of the entire world. She has a morning show with Young Jock. And she got the clip. Everybody you were told to trust with the culture watched it happen and then applauded the person who did their job for them. 2 things are running at the same time right now and almost nobody is connecting them. One is a boxing promotion 2 weeks out from a title fight at State Farm Arena on August 15th that needs Atlanta to care. The other is a legacy media company that just moved onto Netflix and cannot afford to make enemies out of bookable guests. Those are not 2 separate stories. That is one story wearing 2 outfits. And when we get to the part where I break down what changed about the Breakfast Club's actual business structure in 2026, and I promise you we are getting there, because that is the whole reason this clip landed the way it did. You are going to understand why Charlamagne was never going to ask that question, why he was never going to be able to ask that question, and why the man who built a career on Donkey of the Day just spent an entire segment tap dancing around a woman with an 18-0 record. And a public relationship problem. Everything you think you watched on Thursday was the wrong show. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So let us set the table properly, because a lot of people came into this halfway. Claressa Shields, out of Flint, Michigan, 2-time Olympic gold medalist, undisputed champion in multiple weight classes, 18-0 with 3 knockouts, currently holding undisputed heavyweight status after a 100-90 unanimous decision shutout back in February of this year. On paper, she is the most accomplished American boxer alive. She has a biopic. Rachel Morrison directed The Fire Inside. It went to theaters Christmas Day 2024. It was a real film with real reviews. Nobody, and I mean nobody serious, is arguing with her resume. That is not the conversation. That has never been the conversation. Anybody telling you the internet is hating on a black woman champion is either lying to you or has not watched a single one of these clips. The conversation is this. Claressa Shields is publicly in a relationship with Papoose, the Brooklyn rapper, who filed for divorce from Remy on May 22nd of 2025, TMZ reported it May 23rd, in a filing that included claims that Remy cheated on him multiple times after her release. That divorce, as of right now, as of today, is not finalized. The date of separation is still contested. And in the 15 months since that filing, the entire hip-hop internet has watched a slow-motion pileup. The pawn shop receipt Remy posted, the one that got him nicknamed Pawnpuss, the allegations about a Cartier bracelet, the claims and counterclaims about who wrote what, the timeline about when exactly Claressa and Papoose actually met versus when they actually started, and Claressa's own ex-fiancé Tony Rich sitting in the background of that timeline like a loose thread nobody wants to pull. Now here is why this matters right now, today, this week, and not 3 months ago. August 15th, State Farm Arena, Atlanta. Shields vs. K. Scott for unified middleweight titles. 2 weeks out. That is a live gate that has to be sold. That is a promotion that needs the city of Atlanta engaged, and that is exactly why she was sitting in an Atlanta morning show studio in the first place. Press runs are not therapy sessions. Press runs are inventory movement. Every single interview she does in this window has a job, and the job is tickets. So the stakes stack in layers. Personally, this is a 31-year-old woman whose athletic legacy is genuinely historic and whose public narrative has been hijacked by a relationship storyline she keeps volunteering to feed. Financially, this is a fight promotion where every viral clip is either a ticket sold or a ticket refunded, and nobody in her camp seems to know which one they are generating. Culturally, this is about whether hip-hop and boxing media are still allowed to ask a champion an uncomfortable question in an era where the guest is also the content, the booking, and the traffic. And systemically, this is the one. This is about what happens to accountability journalism when the platform doing the accountability gets acquired, streamed, and monetized by a company with a very specific tolerance for controversy. Which brings us to the actual question this entire video exists to answer. Did the Breakfast Club fumble this on Thursday? Or did the Breakfast Club structurally lose the ability to not fumble it? Because those are very different diagnoses, and only one of them has a cure. Let us start with what everybody can see. Evidence number 1, the clip itself. Atlanta, Streets Morning Takeover, Young Jock and MZ Shinika in the room. 2 men and 1 woman on the panel. And it is the woman who leans in and asks, plainly, no preamble, no cushion, how much longer are you willing to be in a relationship with somebody's husband? And you can hear it in the room. That specific silence that happens when somebody says the quiet part in a live studio. Shields does not answer the question. She corrects the terminology. Pause. That's not somebody's husband. Then, he filed for divorce because he's serious about me. That is the exchange. That is the entire viral moment. And note what actually happened there, because this is important for everything that follows. She did not dispute that he is legally married. She disputed the word. She litigated a noun. Filing for divorce and being divorced are not the same thing, and everybody in that studio knew it, which is why the clip traveled the way it did. Evidence number 2. The reach. Within days that clip was on the Shade Room, on the Jasmine brand, on the Streets Morning Takeover's own socials, cut into Reels, cut into Shorts, cut into TikToks, and re-uploaded by every boxing and gossip channel with a microphone. The Shade Room framed it as Claressa correcting the interviewer. That framing is doing heavy lifting, by the way, because correcting implies the interviewer got a fact wrong. She did not get a fact wrong. There is no divorce decree. Until a judge signs, the legal status is the legal status. That is not an opinion, that is not shade, that is paperwork. Evidence number 3, and this is the one that turns a viral clip into a media story. On July 30th, The Breakfast Club ran the segment. The full show is literally titled around it. Claressa Shields asked how she feels about being in a relationship with someone's husband, plus a Jacquees interview. They played the clip live. And what came out of Charlamagne's mouth first was not analysis. It was a laugh. Then it was a preamble. Y'all know I love Claressa Shields. Drop a bomb. But I love me some MZ Shinika. Drop a bomb. Then, that was great radio. Then DJ Envy. That took a little heart. Then the 2 of them arguing about whether she will get asked again, with Envy saying she will keep getting that question and Charlamagne saying, flatly, no she will not, ain't nobody else going to ask her that. Not like that. Now stop. Does everybody understand how strange that is? A man on a nationally syndicated, now streaming daily show, saying that a question is functionally retired. Not that it is unfair. Not that it is disrespectful. That nobody will ask it. That is not commentary. That is a forecast about the courage level of an entire industry, delivered by one of the people who sets that level. Evidence number 4, and this is the self-incrimination. In the same segment, Charlamagne admits it. Out of his own mouth, when she was here, I didn't ask her that directly. Every time she was here, not that directly. Envy adds that they fish around. So let me make sure the math is clean for everybody watching. Claressa Shields has been a guest on that show multiple times. This includes the appearance people still bring up with the money fan out, the 90K on the wrist energy. It includes an event appearance where she and Papoose were in the building together. In all of those opportunities, with the exact same set of public facts available, the biggest urban morning platform in America fished around. Then a morning show in Atlanta walked up and asked in 1 sentence what they could not ask in 5 sit-downs, and their reaction was to give it a standing ovation. That is not neutrality. That is a confession with a laugh track. And oh, do I have more? Because everything I just walked you through is the visible layer, the stuff you could verify with a phone and 10 minutes. What comes next is the part that shows you this was never really about one question in one Atlanta studio. This is where the pattern shows up, and once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. To everybody in the comments right now typing that this is just internet noise and none of it touches her legacy, I want you to stay for the next section specifically, because I am about to show you 4 separate moments from 4 different rooms, with 4 different interviewers where the exact same thing happened. Same setup, same flinch, same result. And the last one of those 4 is going to reframe this whole thing, because it did not come from a blogger, it did not come from a hater, and it did not come from anybody with a dog in this fight. It came from the most credentialed combat sports journalist working today. Stay right there. Let us go inside the room. Cultural evidence number 1, the Ariel Helwani interview. Helwani is not a gossip guy. Helwani is a combat sports institution. The man has broken more legitimate fight news than most outlets have published. Shields goes on his show and she raps. She does a freestyle. Complex covered it, Hot New Hip Hop covered it, it went everywhere in Reels. She names female rappers she rates. It is a fun, light, harmless moment. And then Helwani asks a completely reasonable follow-up. What about Remy Ma? And Complex reported the response directly. She paused, shook her head, and said she does not know many of her songs, so no, she cannot say she is a fan. Now think about what that answer actually is. This is a woman who just finished performing a freestyle on camera on a combat sports show, positioning herself inside a lineage of female rap. And when the single most decorated female battle rapper of the modern era comes up, a woman with a Grammy nomination history, a woman whose catalog is genuinely canon, the answer is I don't know many of her songs. Come on now. Does anybody in this comment section believe that? You can dislike someone. You can decline to comment. You can say, next question, and I would respect it more. But I don't know her songs is the kind of answer that tells you the person is not managing a fact, they are managing a feeling. And when your demeanor changes that visibly between the compliment portion of the interview and the Remy portion of the interview, everybody watching learns something you did not intend to teach them. Cultural evidence number 2, what Remy Ma has actually been doing while all of this happens. On July 24th of this year, 6 days before the Breakfast Club segment, Remy sat with Angie Martinez. iHeart's own platform, by the way. Not a burner blog. Not a shade page. And the entire tone of that appearance was new music, self-care, prioritizing herself, and what she called her soft girl era. Single. Open. Light. She did not run a diss campaign. She did not do a tell-all. She did a press appearance about her own work and her own piece, and she let the internet fill in the rest. And I want everybody to sit with the contrast for a second, because this is the whole video in one image. One woman is doing interviews about her album and her healing. The other woman is doing interviews where she has to keep correcting the definition of the word husband. Cultural evidence number 3, the receipts era. When this thing first went nuclear last year, Remy posted what she said were pawn shop receipts and made allegations about a Cartier bracelet, and the internet went ahead and christened him Papoose, which, respectfully, is one of the most surgical nicknames the culture has produced in years. Papoose responded publicly. Claims and counterclaims flew. He has also, in interviews, reportedly acknowledged that he and Claressa do not live together and that there is no engagement. Sit with that one. Because the woman defending this relationship in public, taking the hits in public, absorbing the questions in public, is defending an arrangement that, by his own public framing, does not include a shared address or a ring. Meanwhile, the marriage he is exiting included a home, a child, a wedding, a television show, and a tattoo that is still on his body. That is not me speculating. That is publicly reported, publicly visible, and publicly acknowledged. Cultural evidence number 4, and this is the one that changes the picture. The anniversary posts. July 6th. Both of them have publicly marked July 6th as the day they met at the Shakur Stevenson fight. Both of them. Repeatedly. Now, and I want to be careful and fair here, because this is where a lot of channels get sloppy. The public account is that this was a first meeting. Platonic. A photo. A crossing of paths. Fine. But then explain to me the framing, because you do not celebrate an anniversary of a handshake. An anniversary marks the beginning of a relationship, not the beginning of an acquaintance. And the timeline around it has never sat flush. There is the ex-fiancé situation with Tony Rich, whose engagement to Claressa reportedly wound down in late 2024 or early 2025, which does not comfortably coexist with a mid-2023 relationship anniversary. There are the different accounts of when the relationship actually began that have been floating around in various interviews. I am not going to tell you I have a document that resolves it, because I do not, and I am not going to fabricate one for a thumbnail. And here is where I will give you the counterargument honestly, because I think you deserve it. Somebody is going to say, people meet, people stay in touch, feelings develop over time, and picking a symbolic date for a relationship is normal and harmless. That is a real argument. I accept the premise. Here is why it still does not save the position. Because the person making the timeline confusing is not a blogger and it is not Remy Ma. It is Claressa Shields, in her own interviews, in her own posts, with her own words. She is the source of every inconsistency in her own story. You called him hubby publicly. Then he is nobody's husband. You said he is not somebody's husband, then in the same breath said if you are going to call him a husband you have to call her his wife, which is an argument that defeats itself in real time. You cannot be the one lighting the fire and then complain that the room is full of smoke. And when a champion athlete with a movie, a Netflix-adjacent media footprint, and a title fight in 2 weeks is generating this much unforced narrative damage on her own press run. The media's job is not to hold her coat, which is exactly where the real story starts. Because here is what I actually want to talk about, and this is the part nobody else is going to give you. Forget the relationship for 10 minutes. The Breakfast Club did not get soft. The Breakfast Club got restructured. And once you understand the restructure, every single thing that happened on Thursday becomes not just explainable but inevitable. Angle 1. The platform change. In January of 2026, full video episodes of The Breakfast Club stopped being distributed the way they had been for a decade and moved to Netflix. Then on May 21st, Netflix announced the show would become their first daily live program, going live weekdays starting June 1st. Reuters covered it. Variety covered it. Deadline covered it. That is not a small adjustment. That is a fundamental change in what the product is. For 15 years, The Breakfast Club was a radio show with a viral clip business attached. Controversy was the product, because controversy generated the YouTube clip, and the YouTube clip generated the ad revenue and the cultural relevance. Donkey of the Day was not a bit, it was a business model. Making a guest uncomfortable was inventory. Now flip it. On a subscription streaming platform, the economics invert completely. Netflix does not sell your outrage to an advertiser by the impression. Netflix sells retention, and it sells the library. What a daily live show on that platform needs is not a viral incident. It is a reliable, bookable, unbroken pipeline of A-list guests, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, forever. Do you understand what that does to the incentive structure? Every guest you burn is a guest you cannot rebook. Every artist camp you alienate is a publicist who stops returning the call. In a clip economy, torching a guest pays. In a pipeline economy, torching a guest costs. Charlamagne did not lose his nerve. Charlamagne's job description got rewritten by a distribution deal. Angle 2, the booking relationship problem, and this one is older than Netflix, but Netflix supercharged it. Claressa Shields is not a random guest. She is a repeat guest. She has been in that building multiple times. She and Papoose were reportedly at a Breakfast Club-affiliated event. MZ Shinika is, by Charlamagne's own account on air, somebody he has known since the Wendy Williams era. So the room he is commenting on is not a room full of strangers, it is a room full of long-standing professional relationships in a small industry. And this is the structural rot in modern interview media, when the interviewer and the subject are both talent in the same ecosystem, both dependent on the same bookers, the same festivals, the same sponsors, the same award shows. The adversarial function collapses. You cannot audit your own network. This is not a character flaw. It is a conflict of interest, and conflicts of interest do not require bad people to produce bad outcomes. Which is why the "I love both of them sisters" line kept coming back. That line is not affection. That line is indemnity. It is a legal disclaimer disguised as warmth, and it appears in the exact spots where a real opinion would otherwise have to go. Watch it again with that in mind, and the segment reads completely differently. Every time an actual judgment was about to form, the preamble showed up to sedate it. Love Claressa. Love Shinika. Great radio. Great question. Great answer. Everybody great. Nobody wrong. Nothing happened. That is not a conversation, that is a hostage video with a soundboard. Angle 3, and this is the one that connects to the fight. The attention economy of a 2-week fight window. Understand what a boxing promotion actually is. It is a live-gate business that has roughly a 14-day window to convert public awareness into physical ticket sales at a specific arena on a specific night. Shields vs. K. Scott, August 15th, State Farm Arena. Atlanta. That is why she was on an Atlanta morning show. Not New York. Not LA, Atlanta. That booking was a targeted local market push, and it is a smart one. Now here is the uncomfortable mechanic. In that window, there is no such thing as a bad clip, there is only a clip that travels and a clip that dies. A dignified, forgettable interview about training camp sells 0 tickets. A viral confrontation about a personal relationship gets her name into feeds that have never watched a round of women's boxing in their lives. So when people ask, why does she keep engaging with this, you have to at least consider the possibility that engaging with it is functionally free advertising, whether or not anybody in her camp planned it that way. The problem is that this is a devil's bargain, because attention acquired through a credibility leak does not convert the same way as attention acquired through a highlight reel. You get the impressions. You do not get the respect. And in combat sports, respect is what turns a casual viewer into a pay-per-view buyer next time. Stack those 3 angles and look at what you actually have. A media institution whose incentive to confront just got financially rewritten. A guest-talent relationship web that makes confrontation professionally expensive. And a promotional calendar that makes controversy commercially useful to the very person being questioned. Every arrow points the same direction. Nobody was ever going to ask that question on that stage. Charlamagne was not making a prediction on Thursday. He was reading a memo. So here is the truth bomb, and I need you to hear this one all the way through, because it is bigger than Claressa Shields, and it is bigger than a laugh in a Netflix studio. The reason nobody with a real platform will ask that question is not that the question is mean. It is that the question is unanswerable without a document, and the document does not exist yet. Think about it. He filed for divorce because he's serious about me is not an answer to how long will you be with somebody's husband. It is a substitution. Filing is an action taken by one party. Divorce is a judgment issued by a court. Reportedly filed on May 22nd of 2025, with the date of separation still contested, and as of today, August 1st, 2026, 14 months and change later, there is still no finalized decree in public view. So every single time anybody asks the question, the only truthful answer available is until a judge signs. That is it. That is the whole answer. And nobody wants to say that on camera, because saying it out loud makes the situation sound exactly as unresolved as it actually is. So instead, the entire ecosystem has agreed to accept a filing as if it were a finalization. And I want you to understand how big that concession is, because it is not a small linguistic favor. It is a rewriting of the standard. Once you accept he filed as equivalent to he's divorced, you have accepted intent as a substitute for outcome. And intent as a substitute for outcome is the most dangerous currency in this entire industry. It is the same logic as the deal is basically done, the album is basically finished, the check is basically cleared. Basically. Allegedly. Reportedly. Pending. That word does an enormous amount of unpaid labor in hip-hop and in boxing, and every time a major platform lets it slide unchallenged, the standard drops a little further for everybody who comes after. And here is the consequence, and this is the part that should genuinely bother you if you care about this woman's legacy at all. Claressa Shields is 18-0. She is a two-time Olympic gold medalist. She has a theatrical biopic directed by an Oscar-nominated cinematographer. She has been undisputed in multiple divisions. That is a first ballot, no argument, historically great career. And right now, in August of 2026, 2 weeks out from defending unified titles in a major arena, the single most viewed piece of Claressa Shields' content on the internet is not a knockout. It is not the 100-90 shutout in February. It is not a gold medal. It is a woman in a radio studio asking her about somebody else's marriage. That is a catastrophic misallocation of one of the great American athletic careers, and every single person who chose comfort over a real conversation helped build it. Because here is what accountability actually is, and I need the people in the back to get this. Accountability is not hatred. Accountability is the only form of respect that survives contact with reality. When you tell a champion great answer after an answer that was not great, you are not protecting her. You are confirming to her that the strategy works. You are removing the single piece of feedback that could have changed the trajectory. And then 18 months later, when the whole thing has calcified into a punchline, the same people who applauded will be the first ones doing the retrospective about how nobody warned her. They laughed. On camera. Then they told her it was fine. Both things happened inside the same 4 minutes. That is not love. That is management. And there is a very old word for what happens to a person surrounded exclusively by people managing them, and that word is isolation. Now let me give you the other side of this, because there is one, and it is the most instructive thing in this entire story. Look at what Remy has actually done for the last 14 months. She has not done a scorched earth interview tour. She has not gone on every platform relitigating the marriage. She took her shots early, publicly, in her own voice, on her own page, and then she went quiet and went back to work. And on July 24th, on Angie Martinez, the conversation was about new music and about her own piece and about what she called her soft girl era. That is a woman who understood something the entire internet took a year to figure out. The timeline was going to do the arguing for her. She did not need to win the news cycle. She only needed to still be standing when the paperwork caught up. That is discipline. And discipline is not glamorous, and it does not trend on a Tuesday, but it compounds. Every week she says nothing. The other side story has to hold itself up alone, and it keeps not being able to. Every week she puts out work instead of a statement, her name attaches to output instead of to a mess. One woman spent this press cycle explaining what the word husband means. The other spent it announcing new music. 14 months later, look at whose position requires constant maintenance and whose position requires none. And I want to extend that same credit to MZ Shinika because she is the actual hero of Thursday's episode and she has not gotten close to enough flowers. She was in a studio with the guest right in front of her. There was no distance, no editing suite, no delay. Just a champion athlete across the desk and a question everybody in the building already knew the answer to and nobody wanted to be the one to say. And she said it. Plainly, without cruelty, without a preamble, without an apology, and without 20 seconds of "I love you, sis" first. That is the entire job. That is what the job has always been. And the fact that the biggest show in urban media watched her do the job and could only respond by calling it good radio tells you exactly which of those two rooms is currently doing journalism and which one is doing hospitality. Same for the independent side of this. There is a reason the deepest reporting on this entire Claressa Papoose Remy timeline has come from YouTubers and independent bloggers rather than syndicated shows with buildings. It is not because independents are smarter. It is because independents are structurally free. No booker to protect. No guest pipeline to preserve. No streaming partner with a brand safety document. When your only obligation is to the people watching, the incentive to tell the truth and the incentive to make a living finally point in the same direction. That is not a moral victory. That is an architectural one, and it is why this space keeps eating legacy media's lunch on story after story. So where does it land? It lands exactly where the evidence has been pointing the whole time. The fight is real, and it is on August 15th, and Claressa Shields will almost certainly win it, because she is one of the best to ever do it, and K. Scott is walking into a very bad night. The record will go to 19-0. The belts will stay. None of that is in dispute, and none of it was ever the point. The point is that a historic career is being narrated by the wrong storyline, and the people with the biggest microphones chose not to say so while it was still early enough to matter. And this is only the start, because two things are coming that will crack this whole thing open. The first is the paperwork. That divorce is unresolved with a contested separation date, and when a decree is finally signed, whenever that is, every single person who spent the last 14 months treating he filed as he's divorced is going to have a date stamped on a document that either vindicates them or buries them. There is no third outcome. The calendar does not negotiate. The second is August 15th itself. Fight week is a press avalanche, final press conference, weigh-in, the post-fight podium with every microphone in the building pointed at her while the adrenaline is still up. Charlamagne says nobody will ask her that question again. There are going to be 100 credentialed people in that arena in 2 weeks, and exactly one of them has to disagree with him. I would not bet against it. Not now. Not after this clip went where it went. So subscribe, because when either of those two things drops, this channel is going to be first, and we are going to be honest about it either way, including if the paperwork lands somewhere that makes my read look soft. That is the deal I make with you, and I have never broken it. Drop a comment and tell me which side you land on. Was Charlamagne protecting a relationship, protecting a booking, or protecting a Netflix contract? Because I genuinely want to see how you all score that one. And before you go anywhere, the next video is already up, and it is the piece of this puzzle I could not fit into this one. There is a single date that both Claressa Shields and Papoose have publicly celebrated, July 6th, the Shakur Stevenson fight, the day they say they met, and both of them have called it an anniversary. Not a meeting. An anniversary. And when you lay that date next to the publicly reported end of her engagement to Tony Rich, next to the reported divorce filing date of May 22nd, 2025, and next to the various start dates she has given in her own interviews across the last 2 years, you get a timeline that does not close. It does not close by a little. It does not close by weeks. Somebody's dates are wrong, and there are only 3 people who know which ones. I put every public date on one board, in order, and walked it forward month by month. Go watch that one right now, because once you see the board, you will never hear the phrase, "We met at the Shakur fight" the same way again.